So now I want to turn it over to Chief Paul Noel and Chief John Thomas of the New Orleans Police Department, a department that I investigated, and some of those use of force reports I'm talking about came from that department. And they will tell you how they've managed to turn this around in New Orleans. Chief Noel, Chief Thomas.
Thank you, Christy. My name is Paul Noel, and I'm a Deputy Superintendent over our Detective Bureau at the New Orleans Police Department. And I head up our EPIC efforts along with Lisa Kurtz, who's an Innovation Manager with the NOPD, and Police Officer Terry Bean, who unfortunately can't be with us today, but he's our top EPIC instructor. And also he's a street cop, which really gives serious credibility to our program. I would like to take a moment to thank you, Christy, and Jonathan for the opportunity to be a part of ABLE. It's been very exciting to play a role in transforming the New Orleans Police Department over the last 7 years or so. And it's even more exciting to have the opportunity to play a similar role in helping transforming the profession of policing in a positive way. When I speak across the country, one thing I always say is, as police leaders, we need to take a proactive role in changing policing ourselves before someone from the outside comes in and does it for us. And the reality of the last few months is, because as a profession, we have not done a very good job of changing our profession, now people from the outside are trying to come in and change our profession. So now it's more important for programs like ABLE for us really to take notice of it and get involved. So the New Orleans Police Department has come a very long way over the last 7 years. I'm very proud of the radical transformation our department has undergone. This change was led by former Superintendent Michael Harrison, who's on this workshop today, now the Commissioner of the Baltimore Police Department, and now continued to be led by our current Superintendent, Sean Ferguson. One of the many innovations that have helped drive our department in a positive way is EPIC. EPIC stands for Ethical Policing is Courageous. EPIC is our peer intervention program, which is based upon social science, the science of active bystandership, which was so heavily researched by Dr. Irvin Staub, who's on this workshop as well. And you'll hear from Dr. Staub a little bit later this afternoon. There's 3 primary legs in the EPIC stool. So think of EPIC, our peer intervention program, as a stool. There's 3 legs to that stool. Without all 3 legs, the stool cannot stand up properly. The first leg of that stool is preventing misconduct. We know police misconduct happens. We're kidding ourselves if we say that we work in a department where there is no misconduct. Every police department in America has current misconduct going on in our department right now, or they have a history of misconduct. If you look at our department, the New Orleans Police Department, we certainly have a history of police misconduct that has occurred well before I was born. The second leg of the stool of EPIC is preventing mistakes. Police officers make honest, innocent mistakes all of the time. They're accidental. They're certainly not intentional, but they absolutely are preventable. They can be prevented through training, but they also can be prevented by officers looking out for one another using active bystandership with programs like EPIC. And the last leg of our stool is promoting officer health and wellness, which is something when we were developing our program before, we only had the misconduct and the mistakes, and we added the health and wellness piece the last 2 years or so. And I really credit Lisa Kurtz, our innovation manager, for leading the charge of adding the health and wellness component. If we don't have a healthy department physically and mentally, can't really have active bystandership. And what I'd like to do now is turn it over to my colleague, John Thomas, who will tell you how EPIC was designed and created by our working group. John?
So John had a momentary technical difficulty. So we're going to give John a second to see if he's on. His camera's on now.
John, I'm just gonna press forward, and if you're able to come across, just jump in, and I will shut up.
Yeah,
so
that's perfect. Thanks, Paul.
So when we created EPIC, we wanted this to be a program that would have immediate impact, that would be supported by police officers and the community. That sounds really easy to do, right? I don't think that's ever been done before. Get something where it's going to be very effective, have police officers buy into it and have members of the community buy into it. But that was our goal. That's what we did, and we're actually able to do it. We started off with a small group of community members, rank and file police officers. I talked about Terry Bean. One of the reasons that Terry is so important, he's a street cop. He worked in our night watch, and our 5th district was notoriously one of our most violent districts. And he was just a regular street cop. He came on board with the program. Jonathan, like he said, Jonathan helped out a lot with doing a lot of pro bono work. We had Dr. Irvin Staub and Joel DeVoskin. You'll hear from them later. And also Ted Quant. Ted Quant was a civil rights leader in New Orleans that was one of our most vocal critics. Mary Howell, who was, you'll hear from Mary later, civil rights attorney, successfully sued the NOPD numerous times with a successive force. Not really a group that you would normally think would get together and be able to come together and actually do anything productive and agree. But our group was able to come together and create this program that is now so successful for us. And our leadership team embraced our peer intervention program. And one thing I think that was so important was that the first EPIC training that we went to, Chief Harrison and the entire command staff sat through that entire program and were engaged. So the leadership embraced they embraced EPIC from the top. So we like to say EPIC is really led from the bottom, and because it is truly a police officer program. But we know in any organization, no program could truly survive unless it is embraced by the leadership. And Chief Harrison and Chief Ferguson, who followed Chief Harrison, have certainly led the example. As our EPIC program continued to move forward, we created what we call EPIC ambassadors. And that is police officers and sergeants who actually work the street. They have street credibility, and they represent our program on the street every single day. And just to give you one example of what our EPIC ambassadors do, after the Floyd incident occurred, Chief Ferguson directed the deputy chiefs and the EPIC ambassadors to actually go to every single one of our patrol roll calls and not only speak about EPIC, because anybody can go speak about EPIC, but actually engage the police officers in a dialogue and ask them, what would you do if you were in that situation? What would you do if you saw another officer kneeling on someone's neck and potentially killing somebody? What would you do? How would you intervene? We all know we all would intervene, but how would we intervene? And we actually made those officers have a dialogue with us. And one thing that I actually challenged the police officers on was, what would you do if you saw me or a high-ranking officer doing the same thing? Would you have the courage to step up and intervene? Because that's one piece of our EPIC program, is we have a contract with one another to intervene regardless of rank. And I think that's really important, because so often in law enforcement, we get too tied to, someone's a higher rank and they do not have the courage to stand up and intervene. And the last piece before I close out, I'm going to show you on my uniform, if you can see this, above my name tag is my EPIC pin. And that EPIC pin not only symbolizes our EPIC program, but it is a physical symbol and reminder of the verbal contract that we have with one another at the New Orleans Police Department, not only to support peer intervention and active bystandership, but we agree to intervene and we agree to accept an intervention as well. And I think that's what's so unique about our program, and that's why I'm so proud to be a part of this.
I want to go back to something you said, Paul, because the whole top to bottom to top, and as Joel DeVoskin says, side to side, that was really important in New Orleans putting together the EPIC concept. And I remember those very early meetings, having the leadership there, having you and John and Arlinda, having the deputy chiefs there, having captains there, but having rank and file there too, and sometimes just the rank and file, and having the community members, like you said, in the room at the same time. If you can just say another word or two about like how you made that happen, because it's not always easy to get that sort of group together. So can you just take a minute and talk a little more about that?
Sure. So when a group like that comes together, there's certainly a lot of skepticism and maybe even a little bit of mistrust, I think, because There's certainly a group that is not normally used to working together. And same thing with the police officers as well. You know, some of the police officers I spoke to initially, you know, they didn't have good things to say about the program. But I think it goes to a tremendous amount of credit to leaders like Superintendent Ferguson, Chief Harrison, to get in the room and actually engage. And I remember one of the the first training program we went to, Chief Harrison was actively engaged in that first training that we had. And that really, you know, once everyone saw that Chief Harrison was not just walking the walk, but he was actually talking the talk, talking the talk and walking the walk at the same time, people really got on board. And what happened, the informal leaders that really help run all of our organizations, we all like to think that, you know, us as deputy chiefs and captains, that we really run the police department, but we know it's the sergeants and the informal leaders that really make the day-to-day operations go. Once they start getting on board, what we saw was the critics, the 5 or 10% that always moan and groan about every single thing, they start shutting up. And maybe not all of them got completely on board, but once they shut up, then that cleared the way for a large majority of our police department to get on board. But it certainly was a challenge in the beginning. But I think it was really, to me, it has gone really helped out the long-term relationships that we've had with our community members. You know, and I didn't really know Mary Howell before. I heard of Mary Howell, all bad things, and I now consider Mary a really close friend, and we share book recommendations and stuff like that all the time. So it's something I think that really, I think has really helped our organization and our community. And the last thing I'll say, Jonathan, is anybody could do change. Change comes and goes. But I think what we have here in New Orleans through this process is a lasting culture change that's going to survive Chief Harrison, going to survive Chief Ferguson, myself, and John Thomas. And
Yeah.
so that's what I'm so proud of.
Yeah, no, and you know, I remember, Paul, from those early meetings, a couple things really stick out with me. I remember Deputy Chief Westbrook, who's on the call with us today, who leads internal affairs. I remember she was actively involved every step of the way, but I remember her specifically saying, I shouldn't be out in front, right? This shouldn't be an internal affairs program. This shouldn't be that sort of program. And I thought it was very, very thoughtful and wise of her. Well, I know we'll hear more from her in a minute, but to have her rolling up her sleeves and involved in every step, but recognizing right away that if this is viewed as an internal affairs program, it doesn't really work, was, I think, very powerful. And the other thing I remember from those early meetings that you're talking about are how we tested it so many times, right? We would come up with a concept and answer to questions. We'd test it on a few officers, and then get beat up and realize that wasn't the right answer and go back to the drawing board. And ultimately what we have today is, the result of, I'll say at least the result of tons of my mistakes, right? Tons of me getting it wrong. And that's kind of how we kept building and building. So I think those early meetings were critical, and I love that everyone else gets the benefit of all that work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think that's going to be one of the challenges for any city for starting a process like this, is you have to find a group like that to come together. You have to find your biggest critics. Anybody could get their biggest fan club and come together and work on a program. But to be able to bring your biggest critics in a room and work on a program like this and develop a program for your own organization, not only I think will you get a better product, but you're going to get lasting relationships that will build between the community and the police department that any healthy organization should have. And the NOPD wasn't healthy before because we didn't have those relationships. Those bonds weren't built. And now we're really gone a long way to building those bonds and maintaining them.
Yeah, it's funny because for us who have lived this for so many years, to have Mary Howell and Ted Quant on the phone with us today, all on this exact same team, and to have police officers, and hear me, a monitor, like it's practically the start of a joke, right? You monitor a police officer and community members walk into a meeting room. It really is astounding that when everything seems to be dividing the country these days, somehow this program, well, not somehow, I understand how, but this program has brought such a diverse group of people together. It's, I mean, to sound mushy, it's kind of heartwarming.
Yeah, well, in New Orleans, we walk into a bar, not a meeting room. But it really is exciting that the work that was done, the hard work in the beginning, is now going to be a springboard, hopefully, for a national movement to really change policing. Because again, if we don't, as police leaders, if we don't change and we don't recognize that policing needs to change, others are going to come in and change policing for us, and probably not to our liking. And this is, programs like EPIC, programs like ABLE, there's no downside that anyone could say that there's a negative, there's something negative that comes out of this. It's not a, rat your buddy out program. This is not an internal affairs program. This is truly about saving police officer lives and saving careers. And if that's one thing you could get out of this is, if you're from a union shop, or, if you have some concerns over police officer rights, this is truly just about saving police officer lives and saving careers. If you're not for saving police officer lives and careers, this is not for you. But if you are, you're in the right place.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, Paul. Thanks very much. And John, apologies that we couldn't get your video working. If we have a chance to bring you in later in the discussion, we will.